Yeah, I can start with a really general question. So, I mean, I think it's really interesting how you both are working together. So, what kind of sparked your interest in the philosophy of science and then more specifically the philosophy of sociology?
Yeah. I'm originally a sociologist, then I moved to philosophy of science, particularly experimental philosophy of science, although I've also written my thesis about the early modern period and scientific revolution, so which gave me some background in the history as well. And my colleague is a sociologist who did some of the statistical analysis and interpretations for the project. So he will step in later. And as you know, experimental relies heavily on empirical methods like interviews or surveys borrowed from sociology or psychology or cognitive sciences. So I was able to use my training in those fields when planning this particular research.
Yeah. That's really interesting. That's cool that you're able to kind of combine both philosophy and sociology in that way. I haven't had much exposure to experimental philosophy, so looking at your paper was really interesting. Do you think there's anything like uniquely challenging about doing this type of philosophy as opposed to just doing more or just non-experimental philosophy, I guess, and writing papers more focused on history and stuff?
Well, in this particular paper, we're trying to combine like this philosophical analysis with historical and empirical methods. So it's kind of a crossover of three fields. And we dubbed this new approach integrated history and experimental philosophy of science. So it's already in that name. And we think it's a new contribution that builds on what can be drawn from all these disciplines. And we apply these methods on the topic of objectivity, and it's understood by contemporary scientists. But of course, we've also been trying to find some historical roots in this current understanding. And this, I don't think it's particularly challenging, but we have to find some way how to put all these things together so that they work. And you can see some results that are present here, but also some drawbacks of combining these approaches.
Thank you. I guess I can start asking you questions about your paper, but so for the integrated HPS proceedings, you submitted the paper Theoretical and Empirical Perspectives on Objectivity, Transforming a Historical Account into an Investigative Tool, which is what the paper you were just referencing. So I guess if you wouldn't mind, could you briefly summarize the main point of this paper and talk about any particular part of it you would like to talk about?
Mm-hmm. So I would briefly say what are the main topics, conclusions. We in our research that we kicked off with basically with interviews with scientists and then surveys. So in these qualitative parts, we identified 11 categories of objectivity, which are used by contemporary scientists, but again, a lot of them have roots in history. You can trace them back to Francis Bacon, Descartes, Boyle, etc. And so these categories are external view, critical thinking, quantification, testability, mathematical consistency, accuracy, intersubjectivity, usability, correspondence to reality, and closeness to the truth. And for all those categories, we performed analyses which revealed how they are grouped together and what are their mutual relations. For example, we found out that objectivity can be defined either positively or negatively in terms of affinity or distancing. And the positive quality connotes close adherence or affirmation to something, which can be either truth or reality or accuracy or mathematical consistency. But you also can have like negative qualities, which imply a distance or separation from something, like impartiality or intersubjectivity or external views. And of course, we asked the scientists about which dimensions of or categories of objectivity they prefer. So there are some frequencies to these categories. Like they prefer some, and some of them are not frequent, are not so common. So and there is also another possible perspective. We call it, or it is called in philosophy of science, it's called processual definition of objectivity, which points to experimental aspects of science, such as reproducibility, testability, or quantification. And our data also confirmed that these categories also sort of hold together, and they form a distinct group. So I would refer everyone to our paper with the commentary, which has all the details, including the quantitative statistics and interpretations. And besides this, we also decided to test the Crombie hacking theory of scientific styles, which is I dubbed it, I nicknamed it Crombie hacking, but it comes from historian Alistair Crombie, who proposed his styles of scientific thinking, and they were later accommodated in philosophy of science by unhacking. And we also wanted to find out if these categories are statistically, in a statistically significant way, related to objectivity. And the overall conclusion is that these Crombie hacking styles do not impose much influence on the way objectivity is understood by the scientists, nor they provide explanations of it. It's more like that the scientists' preferences remain stable across all the styles.
Really interesting. I guess. How did both of you kind of get involved on this specific project? I guess Peter, did you start the philosophy kind of side of it? But I think it's interesting how both of you ended up working on this project, even though you have different disciplines.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I will say something about this inspiration, and František can go on more about the statistics and the methods that we employed. So in the first place, what was the motivation? We wanted to employ some novel methodology and apply it to some traditional questions from history and philosophy of science. And like one of the conclusions from this is that we can say that it's relatively easy to study these concepts and theories with qualitative methods such as interviews, and some simple quantitative methods such as descriptive statistics. But in general, there are also limits to the transfer of these historical and philosophical concepts and theories to an empirical setting. And because these concepts have to be, or theories, they have to be simplified, and this simplified or attenuated version may stray away from the original source. So now I can hand it over to František, and he can tell us more about the methodology itself.
Yeah. Okay. So as sociologists by background, well, both of us, we use survey questionnaire as a method how to collect data from the scientists. So we prepared structured interview with standardized questions, standardized answers. So quite common sociological methodology. Regarding the sampling of the respondents, we use, let's say, census approach. So we choose some institutions, Czech Academy of Sciences, which is like top scientific institution in our country. Charles University, one of best universities in our country. Masaryk University in Brno, in some respects, again, best university. Southern University, and yeah, that's it. 3 universities in Czech Academy of Sciences. And Petr chooses or selected the kinds of departments we are interested in. And it was mainly like hard scientists, physics, mathematics, and the biology was the softest department or softest field. So somewhere between mathematics and biology, we ask all of these departments to contribute to our project and fill some questionnaire. So there was no sampling like probability sampling or choosing exact scientists. We ask all, and we received 1,000 answers, 1,000. So it's a huge sample because it's 1,000 not normal respondents, citizens, but it's 1,000 of scientists. I'm quite new to the field, but it's the most robust sample I've ever seen, because in papers we consult there are like 200-300 hundreds of scientists. Am I right, Petr? We are unique in this respect in the sample size.
I think the scope of the project that allowed us to approach all these institutions, and we cooperated with the presidents of the universities, and so they gave us a lot of support. So we achieved about 15% of response rate, which is quite unique because usually scientists do not have much time to fill in questionnaires and or do interviews. So that was quite a success already, like from the methodological point of view.
Yeah, we know that, and okay, we are also known about this sensitivity that 15% responded. So we know that this is the 15 most active or most interested in part of these institutions. But so we take it into account when we are interpreting results. It's needed, but but we think that it's good practice to ask all and try and have the ambitions to do a census and to employ all these scientists. So that's way how we selected our respondents. That we selected only institutions and field inside these institutions, and here we ask all. And regarding the statistical analysis, we used let's say broad toolkit of methods, from some very, very simple one like primary tables or contingency tables with chi-square, which is something which is very basic for testing if there is some relationship between two variables or not. and here we were, for example, interested in what are underpinnings for comprehending the objectivity in some way. So why people choose one dimension and not the other? If it's dependent on their background or their age or their scientific rank. So this was one we used heavily. This it's some basic it's some basic strategy. Then we also, for some more comprehensive view, we also use correlation analysis, like these dimensions of objectivity correlate together, one which each other hold these 11 dimensions Peter defined, and the results was reported by the Peter, and then because we were also interested in whether these 11 dimensions are unique or if there is some latent classes or some latent variables behind them. And if this is just, for example, only 11 words, but describing, let's say, 3 dimensions or in real. So we also made factor analysis, principal component analysis, discriminant analysis, and so these methods for latent structures, for analyzing latent structures, which showed us that it was really good in selecting these dimensions because they seemed, according to our analysis, unique. That they do not group that much together and do not much correlate too much together, which means that if you see objectivity one way, we can't predict if you will prefer some other dimension or not, which is I can say it's just a bit upsetting if someone is analyzing it because you are analyzing it and you are looking forward some high coefficients and correlations and for relationships of the variables, and it was not there, and still not, and still not, and still not, and it was something like a desert, and I was really much upset. But then I realized that it's a good that it's a good news, and that it's a good information and very much a good result. That we have no statistical, that we have only limited number of some statistical significant correlations and so on, and that's because the team did great work in preparation phase, that they prepare something which is unique and which is not correlated with some other things, and that also this probably this problematic of objectivity is multidimensional, and it's something which is very complex. And team found some unique way how to address this, and that's why we receive these results. Because I didn't make. Now we are about to do some Monte Carlo simulations, how it would look like if people would respond completely randomly.
Yeah.
And we are very much curious about this because okay, we are very much curious. I will not do tell any of my suspicions or what I think that we might find, because it would not be correct. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Is this the first kind of experimental philosophy paper you've worked on?
Me, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or we did. I think Peter, a year ago, we posted some.
We already. Well, maybe I will say something more about the context of this particular research and more about the project, because this is what I presented. It's a part of larger three-year project called an experimental approach to the traditional philosophical question, which is funded by the Czech Science Foundation. And it was a multidisciplinary project, as František mentioned. So besides philosophers and sociologists, we had about 5 natural scientists on the team, including physicists, biologists, and mathematicians. So we started with these basic methods such as interviews and questionnaire surveys to gain deeper insight into the question. Then as we know, a lot of these questions are related to history or philosophy of science. So like besides apart from these historical or philosophical questions, we also discovered some very contemporary issues that are related to science as a global enterprise. So, for example, the scientists talked a lot about the problems that are connected with the proliferation of science, of top science, into new territories, such as China or some other. And again, like this progress is associated with some issues that concern replicability of the science, because these are these cultures are sort of newcomers, so they have other traditions, they have other traditions, how to approach the truth, how to approach the methodology. So that was one of the other topics that's not but it is sort of related to history, because it all originates in the traditions and the cultures where the science is now. So that's more about the scope of the project and context.
Thank you. So I guess now I'm going to move on to asking both of you more general questions, if that's okay. So do either of you have a favorite project you've worked on, or a favorite philosophy project you've worked on?
Yeah, I would say that this is my first bigger projects. I did some projects, but they were purely theoretical, comparison projects and literary sources and that kind of thing. So this is first bigger empirical project.
Yeah.
And yeah.
For me, this is also the best project, my favorite, because and I like to say here publicly two things. First, that I'm really glad that Petr invite me to be part of this team, because it's something to I like it very much, to researchers. It's investigators, and it's very interesting project, and I'm really glad that I could be part of it and just do some help and help with this. And the second and the last thing is go Hokies.
Thank you. And yeah, if I don't want to be really aware of your time, so I'll just ask one more question, if that's okay. So this kind of is to both of you. I'll ask it a little bit differently. So do you have any practical advice for young people, either beginning their career in philosophy or their career in sociology, or just in general in academia? Is there anything that you wish somebody had told you when you were starting out?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's a little bit special, because I moved to philosophy of science after I had a career in business communication. or for a number of years. But I still view this move positively because I was sort of burned out, from like 12 years of doing communication. So, and I really wanted to pursue some studies which would give me like deeper understanding of something, of some area. And but I would like, my recommendation would be try to combine pure philosophy with some other discipline, because in my view, like these crossover areas, like borderline disciplinary studies, are the most interesting right now, and because you can combine more expertise from more fields. So that's where things are moving now, like particularly in experimental philosophy of science. It's a really interesting and progressive part of philosophy now.
Yeah. I have one recommendation for them, to carefully listen to their inner voice of meaning. I mean, if I could give one advice to my 20 years old self, so I would give myself this advice: listen to your inner voice of meaning and follow what you think, what you deeply think it's meaningful. Don't care if it's scientific mainstream nowadays. Do not care if your advisors like it, if it's popular, if people care in some blogs and whatever. And also, do not care about this buzz and from outside, and carefully listen to what seems meaningful to you, and do it and research it. And if it's philosophy, okay. And if many people are frowning like, oh, what is it, who reads Aristotle now, or who reads philosophy, who needs this, and do not care about this. If it's inner meaningful for you, do it. Because now we are living in very complex time, and no one could expect what we will need in the future, and what might be good, and what might be handsome and helpful. And when we find it, there is no we are running out of time to get these skills and to get experiences and to get some knowledge. So for example, 1 year ago in January 2020, who knows that epidemiologists might do some nice work. Everyone was like, these guys, it's epidemiology, that's not much. And now they are, at least in our country, one of the big and the wisest man, and everyone listens to them and consult and so on. And so, for example, Petr is doing philosophy of science, and some of his other research, for example, could help comprehend us why in the community of epidemiologists there are still some discord, and why people are still discussing things, why they can't agree on some basic things, and so on. And it's also important for us, because now everyone was asking what we should do against COVID. And after 1 year, people start asking, so why these scientists can't agree? and for example, philosophy of science now has the answers, which could have some practical insights for the people. So, okay. Also, people are discussing, so there are pros and cons camps, and listen carefully. If you are listening to some experts, you need to listen, and so on and so on. So that was just illustration of my main advice. Do what you personally think is meaningful, because no one could expect when we will need you.
Thank you. Those are both really good pieces of advice. Thank you. Yeah. Do either of you have anything else you'd want to mention for this interview?
I think I said pretty much everything. It's like František's point was interesting because I've been part of this group that is advising Czech Prime Minister currently on COVID, and yeah, we have seen a lot of those things that we were studying only theoretically, like the scientific discord. It's pretty much going on now, and it's influencing lives, and people depend on scientific advice, and so this is an interesting part of the discipline currently.
No, absolutely. It's super applicable. I don't know. In the United States, I don't know how many. I think we have some conflicting views on science over here. I don't know how it is in the Czech Republic, but it's definitely interesting. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being able to meet with me. I really enjoyed talking to both of you and reading your paper. It was really interesting. I hadn't read a ton of experimental philosophy before, so it was super cool to know that was kind of just like a discipline in philosophy.